Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. As we begin this new video set series on the types of political systems, this video will talk about how governments get structured. This is important for laying the foundation for how countries govern themselves and what usually goes into creating a government structure. As I talked about in my previous video, there are many different kinds of governments that operate differently in every country. Countries are either ruled by one person, a few sets of people, or anybody who is a citizen. Rulers can get their power from being born into a specific kind of family, wealth, voting, passing tests, God, or an army. Rulers could do whatever they want, what the Constitution and law says, what the people say, what the Holy Book says, make themselves and their followers rich, use their rulership to stay in power, make sure everyone gets a fair share of everything, or keep their country safe from their enemies. In the United States, citizens have the power to make change, but it is a few set of people like Congress and the president who get their power from the people. Those elected officials are responsible for governing the United States on behalf of the citizens while following the Constitution. There are different ways governments can form, but ultimately they are designed by people. Government designers are influenced by the things they see around them in terms of looking at how political institutions have and have not worked in other countries and at other times. Governments are shaped by what their designers have lived through and what they have learned from their lives. They are shaped by where they are in the world, including who their allies and neighbors are. It makes a huge difference on who sits at the table where the government gets designed, since it is about whose perspective is represented in the decision-making process. Whichever perspective gets represented the most will usually have that perspective implemented in forming a government. We also have to look at how much the designers know about their options for a political system. Most people have only lived through one, two, or more kinds of governments in their lives. All of those factors get mixed in with intangible things like who citizens want to be as a country and who controls the institutions. It is essential that countries know their principles and values to govern themselves and stay consistent with them. When a government sacrifices its principles and values for economic and political demands that do not align with the best interests of their community, the results are often devastating, where the overall population of their community does not succeed. Now, just because a government starts off one way does not mean it has to stay the same way forever. In fact, having a static government will not meet the constantly evolving challenges society faces, because that government will not have the tools developed to prevent those challenges from hurting their community. Governments can evolve and change just like the human beings that design and rely on them. They have to, no matter what type of political system the governments operate on. To avoid being static, governments, even non-democratic ones, must listen to their citizens and hear their ideas and perspectives from them. They should pay attention to what their citizens think of them, because governments have to do two things if they want to survive: authority and legitimacy. Governments have authority when citizens accept that their institutions have the power to make rules and obey the rules those institutions make. Authority is what makes you pull over when you hear a siren behind you, or pay your taxes even if you would rather keep that money. This is because you know there will be consequences if you disobey the police or the Internal Revenue Service, or IRS. People are more likely to accept the authority of governments when they see them as legitimate. Governments get legitimacy when they follow their own rules and use their power appropriately. Legitimacy is why you accept the outcome of an election or a court case, even if the results do not go your way. This is because you know the process of counting the votes was done fairly, or you know a court trial was conducted appropriately to uphold justice for the people involved in the case. However, when people do not think their government is legitimate, they are more likely to ignore laws or take matters into their own hands. For example, they might engage in civil disobedience or even take violent actions to topple the government. Governments that abuse their authority tend to lose their legitimacy. This is why it is important for government officials to take their jobs seriously and not abuse it to only benefit themselves or a small segment of the population, since governments serve everyone. So, no matter what kind of government you have, legitimacy is pretty important. But how do we know if we have a legitimate government? You need to look at the process to see if people in power are making decisions the right way. To know the process, you should know how a bill becomes a law and have the government's actions be predictable. This will allow us to know the process was being followed appropriately. It is important to see if there is plenty of transparency about how your government is working and if their rules are fair and working for everybody. Of course, not every politician is going to live up to their ideals or follow the rules. In fact, having rules is not enough. It is just words on a piece of paper. The thing that matters the most is making sure that we, as citizens, check our politicians to make sure they follow the rules and fix regular people's problems, not just their friends or getting rich off the rest of us. That is how we retain our power instead of blindly giving it up to politicians who will not govern effectively. Speaking of power, what do the rulers actually do with their power once they have it? In some ways, this is the most important question of all. Governments tend to prioritize the interests of the people who hold the power. When one person is in charge, their opinions count more than everyone else's. Their interests tend to get the most attention. The more people who have power, the more interests have to be balanced. But it can be hard for a big group of people to decide what to do. Sometimes it is helpful to limit who makes decisions, but if only a few people are making decisions, it really matters who they are and how they got there. They might not care about what other people need if they are in charge for the rest of their life. If they took power by force, they might only listen to other strong people. If their power comes from wealth, they might only care about profits and protecting themselves and their rich friends. If they are all the same kinds of people, they might ignore the needs of people who are not like them. With all of this in mind, we have to give people in power a reason to care about what all kinds of citizens want and need. And if we want a legitimate government, we need ways to make powerful people follow the rules, such as courts, media stories, protests, and new ways to put new people in power if the old ones will not listen to their community members. Again, as citizens, it is truly up to us to keep reminding our government officials that they are there to serve the public. As much as we would like to think all government officials are there to serve everyone, we cannot take our eye off them. We have to keep holding them accountable. In democracies, some things they have are a free press, civil liberties, transparency and accountability, peaceful transitions of power, limits on authority to prevent overpowered actions, and giving a diverse group of people access to power. Democratic governments almost always promise these things, although they do not always deliver. Again, this goes back to how a specific country with a democracy functions and the challenges it faces. But these measures help make a safe, healthier, happier, and more stable country, since it still allows inclusive civic participation. And governments have more legitimacy and authority when they govern safe, healthy, and happy citizens. One more thing to keep in mind is that democracies do not have to look like the American government to give citizens a role in the decision-making process and the tools to advocate for change. As long as people are making decisions together, the only limits are what they can imagine and agree on. To wrap this video up, every government gets structured based on authority, legitimacy, and power. Governments are human-made institutions that succeed when they actively listen to their citizens to evolve and address society's challenges instead of remaining static. We have to make sure they use the power given to them responsibly and inclusively. To have a legitimate government, it needs to listen to its citizens, follow its own rules, and work towards the well-being of everyone, not just a small segment of the population. As citizens, our role is not passive, but rather active in holding officials accountable and ensuring the government reflects the principles and values we want for our society. Ultimately, governments are what people make of them, And it is up to us to imagine, demand, and build systems that serve everyone. In the next video, we will talk more about power by looking at historical political thinkers' insights on what power meant to them, which will provide a historical perspective of power and how that has shaped certain political systems. Until then, please like this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and turn on the post notifications so you will be notified when I post my next video. I appreciate your support. Remember, you are powerful, you are capable, and you are the changemaker our society needs. Thank you so much for watching this video. I will see you soon.